Paul Polar Bear Varelans, the fighter people overlook, but shouldn't. When fans talk about the early days of mixed martial arts, they often gravitate toward the names that became champions, legends, or long-term stars. But the story of the UFC's formative years isn't complete without acknowledging the men who stepped into the cage before weight classes, before modern rules, and often before the sport even had a name. One of those men, too often underrated, is Paul Polar Bear Varelans. Yes, his record doesn't shine like some of his contemporaries, but judging a pioneer by modern standards misses the point entirely. Varelans fought at a time when fighters had virtually no blueprint. There were no super camps, no dietitians, no specialized MMA coaches, and very little knowledge on how to blend styles. What Paul had was toughness, size, surprising agility for a giant of his era, and a willingness to test himself in real combat long before it was a career path. To make it to the UFC in the mid-1990s, you didn't just fill out a form. You had to survive a world where every fight was closer to a street brawl than a sport. And Varelans didn't just survive. He competed with some of the best the early sport had to offer. That alone speaks volumes. His ability to take punishment, keep moving forward, and use his wrestling-based pressure made him a legitimate threat. He wasn't a technician by today's standards, but he didn't have to be. He was effective in the era he lived in, and that is the proper way to judge a pioneer. Beyond his individual fights, Varelans helped shape the mythology of early MMA. The image of a massive, intimidating heavyweight who walked into the cage without fear became part of what drew fans into the sport. He represented a time when courage mattered more than records, and when every fighter stepping through the cage door was essentially walking into the unknown. His legacy in Ultimate Fighting, Paul Varelans' legacy isn't measured in belts or win-loss columns. It's measured in contribution. He was one of the original big men who showed that heavyweights could be more than lumbering giants. He fought frequently, took on whoever was put in front of him, and helped establish the template for future heavyweights who combined size with raw power and forward pressure. He also became an early symbol of what would eventually become shoot-style cage fighting. No frills, no pageantry, just men testing the limits of their will and toughness. His presence during those foundational years helped solidify the UFC as a place where the toughest fighters in the world met, with no excuses, no shortcuts, and no certainties. Varelans may not have had the most glamorous career, but he was undeniably part of the backbone that kept the sport standing while it was still learning to walk. And for that, Paul Polar Bear Varelans will always stand as a true pioneer in the history of ultimate fighting, deserving far more respect than he often receives.